Thank you for joining us, James, on our channel, and just wanted to
You're welcome.
know you. And can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do and what Ride from Within is?
Sure, absolutely. So I guess we start from the beginning, not the very beginning, but you know what I'm saying. I was studying Chinese martial art in the 80s and 90s, really seriously, and my sister is the rider. So part of my studies went from kind of this hard style kung fu system into a more internal style, Tai Chi and Bagua. And in that style, there's a whole side of it that's healing, internal healing the body, externally healing the body. So I was up visiting my sister back in probably '94, and the woman who she was training with and learning from had been ill, and just some internal stuff. So I was working with her. She asked me if what I did could help her. So I started doing some breath work, but basically qigong work, if you will, energy work, breath work. And after about 6 months of that, she said that she thought the breath work was really helping her riding. And it's totally, first of all, I wasn't into horses or riding at the time. So I just said, oh, that's good. And then she was like, no, seriously, there's something here. So that's how I got introduced to it. And they bred Lipizans. They have a Lipizan breeding facility, and they're very much into the classical dressage. So that was my first introduction. And from that introduction, I got introduced to an Olympic level U.S. dressage rider that wanted to use Tai Chi principles for her riders and her own riding. And that just started this ball rolling. And from that came the first DVD, Cross Training for Riders. The book, I was asked to publish a book or write a book. All of that came from just that first initial chance encounter. And I like it because I was just there trying to help her. I had no agenda. I was just trying to apply my craft or my trade, if you will. And so that's how it started. And then the riders knew in the beginning that it helped them and helped their horses. They could feel these changes in their horses profoundly. But my eye hadn't been trained to look at horses yet. So I just took their word for it. And, 20 years later, I see these profound changes in the movement of the horse, in the movement of the horse's skeleton, right? Because that's what, if to get into what we do, just like there's a profound difference between Kung Fu, the external martial art, and the internal arts, if you will, Tai Chi, Bagua, that one uses strength and leverage. So bigger, faster, stronger always has the advantage. And one borrows power, or we learn to receive force and redirect it. And in that art, bigger, faster, stronger does not have the advantage because you're not pitting strength against strength. So that's what we do differently in Ride from Within, is I teach, it is focused on riders because the horses already live these principles. The horses never use more force or energy than is necessary at any given moment, right? And they get a bad rap for it because they're called lazy, and they don't move forward, and they don't, all these things that are the natural way. They just use enough force and enough energy. So we're trying to become more like the horse as opposed to understanding the horse better. We want to understand ourselves better. And we want to be able to, I think this is where it's different than any other like-minded training and approaches to horses, is there, because the martial history, there is a definite difference in how we use our bodies, you know, to receive and redirect force or to use strength and leverage. They're two different worlds. So we learn to respond differently to force in our bodies, in the saddle and on the ground, but we primarily in the saddle. And that's what makes it profoundly different. One of the ideas was that it's a shift of a paradigm. And to me, that's the crux of it, is we learn to use our bodies differently in response to receiving the force of the horse. And that's where it's definably different, meaning it's just not different words to explain the same thing. It's an actual different response. So
I'll ask you just a real quick question. You said we use the force of the horse differently. Can you, I don't want people to think that we're thinking the muscular strength force of the horse. Are you referring to that, or are you referring to a different force?
A different force. There's two, well, there's two primary forces that we deal with. Gravity is the primary force that we deal with all the time, even though most of us aren't aware of it. And when it comes to the force of the horse, it's the measurable force that's created when the horse pushes into the earth with one of its limbs, right? I think it's called earth resonance force. If you're, technically earth resonance force. So just like the horse, we push in with our left leg, and that force, the earth pushing back, if you will, moves through our skeleton and our body moves. If we don't push, the potential for force is there, but nothing happens. The minute I push in, my body moves. So that's the force coming up through the horse from the earth into, and we receive it primarily through our sit bones, right? So we receive this power through our sit bones, and it permeates our skeleton. Or in the case of strength and leverage, we block it, and where we block it, we use that as a fulcrum with our to leverage against. So the old way, you use the force to leverage against, it blocks us. Like our lower back is the primary one that everybody has, lower back and hips, or lower back and knees, depending on the saddle. And that's where we get to block. And in blocking that force, we have this illusion, or we feel more balanced. It's because we're more still. So in the old paradigm, we use strength and leverage to hold our center still. The new paradigm, I'll say blocking, but by leveraging against it. In the new paradigm, we allow that force to flow through us, and therefore our center moves more, so our limbs can be still. The old paradigm, we hold against it. We keep our balance, if you will. We keep our balance by contracting in and holding our center still. So we're actually using the force to leverage ourselves. The leverage might not be the clearest word. Wedge. We wedge ourselves in. We hold ourselves still. And that blocks the force. So that force coming up through the horse from each hind foot, through the sit bone, and it travels through the skeleton. That's why I'm clear that it's in the rider's physical body. The thing that we want to do differently is learn to feel and move that force through our skeleton, and that again is a primary difference, the new paradigm, if you will.
You probably see a lot more injuries in the old paradigm in riders as well than in the new one. You know, lower back problems and those hip.
Yeah, they're it's interesting. In the beginning, you don't see the injuries because they're long-term wear and tear in the joints, right, in the bone. So we see the injuries long-term, and we're not talking getting bucked off and hitting the ground type of injuries, but long-term repetitive use, if you will, force against force injuries in the lower back, the hips, the hip, the ball and socket of the hips, and the knees, right? Because that's where we leverage. So in my clinics and demos, I'll mimic somebody that's ridden for years in an English or dressage saddle, and everybody knows by my movement, oh, that's a dressage rider. And then I'll do a cowboy or a Western saddle, and everybody knows without any prompting, oh, that's a cowboy. And the difference for me is what I do is when I walk with my back very tight and held up and my hips very held, and the other I walk with my knees and my back tight. And so my point is that what makes that stereotypical outline of the body is actually holding and bracing against a force greater than yourself over years. And it's always us that wear out, right? We wear out. And unfortunately, horses wear out all the time. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's probably better. So the same places that riders wear out, their lumbar spine, their pelvis, right, meaning their hip joints, and our knees are the same places the horse wears out. The lower back, right, the lumbar spine, although we don't see that as often or early because it's such a large mass of bones, right? The bones are huge there, right? Compared to the hock and stifle. So the same injuries, the same root cause, tension and holding in the lower back to hold ourselves still against this bigger force. The horse has to brace here, but we don't see it there as often. Maybe in autopsies they see, oh, the back was really compromised. But where we see it is in the lighter joints directly below let's say the sacrum and the pelvis. And we'll see it directly in front, right? In the thoracic spine where horses' backs are out. And oddly enough, when my dear friends who adjust horses chiropractically, let's say, and massage therapists that work on horses, everybody that I know that works on horses, their lumbar spine, the middle of their thoracic spine, and their poles are the go-to for adjustments or treatment. And these are the same thing in the human. The lower back is the root cause of holding the lumbar spine, iliosacral area, lumbar spine, and we then have to compromise or compensate farther up the back by either lifting our chest up or rounding it way back. We compromise here, and we compromise therefore the end of the line is the head, and we have to compensate. So I always see the root cause is here again, and then it moves up the spine or forward in the spine in both horse and rider. So again, this is the part that's elusive that we have to keep coming back to. these tensions or blocks are how we keep our balance against the larger force, right? So they serve us. This serves us short term. Long term, it wears us down. So Ride from Within is developed to first teach the rider to receive that force, what that actually means in the physical body, right? It's not a mental, even though there's many, as my friend says, many brain things happen when you receive that force. You can understand it intellectually. You can understand it in your logical mind, and not have it change in the body. So we work really hard at first freeing up the held tension in these areas through movements on the ground. Because again, one of the things that I have to remind people, how we move on the ground is how we move in the saddle. And if that wasn't true, me coming to riders after, I couldn't have done what I've done, because I had a teacher, an amazing teacher, change the way I moved on the ground, not for riding, but to heal my back, because I had 8 years of chronic back pain when I was training in Kung Fu. So I was in incredible shape, physical shape on the outside. But my back would go out and I was crippled. So she helped me change my belief around what was going on in my back. She helped me physically change the way I use my bone structure. In other words, I was dealing with gravity a completely different way, right? By moving I didn't call it my seat back then, it was my center, right? And I have this little sketch, your center being your lower back, your pelvis, and your femur bones, or your seat. So I learned to move that differently on the ground, not for riding, not for any other reason, but I had this crippling back pain that was ruining my life. It was ending my functional life, the life I wanted to live, So it all ties in. So again, that force, I'm sorry, it's a very long answer to what is the force I'm talking about. It's the force that's created in movement, and we either oppose it by holding still, or we receive and redirect it. And that's the main, the catchphrase is we receive and redirect that force. So the first part of the learning is how to receive that force. And then all of the habits, the unconscious habits of holding against force pop up.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And for those of you who've never lessoned or clinicked with James or read his book, that's one of the reasons why he really, really stresses the ground exercises that he teaches you. And in fact, in clinics, we do that first every morning for a couple hours before we get on the horse.
Yes, it's they're beyond. They seem the groundwork seems quite simple, and it's not. It's very precisely aligned, and in my mind, it's so precise it can overwhelm people. So I just keep it simple. Stand like this. It feels weird when you do it. Good. Remember that it feels weird. That's how you get to remember it. Because if you do it the old habit, it doesn't feel weird. It just feels normal. So yes, that groundwork is profound in changing how we move on the ground, so that we have a new ability. We have a new awareness of ourselves when we're in the saddle. And then when we're in the saddle, one of the things that we start to do is we feel, and when I say feel, it's the sense of feel. I used to say it deepens, which is it does. You get much more awareness, and the awareness of yourself precedes a deeper feel or heightened sense of feel. beyond that, most of us, in my mind, we feel at three different levels. We all have a really heightened sense of feel with our skin and our hair. Like if you have a spider crawling on your arm, that registers no weight, right? There's no gravity in that spider, but you feel it immediately when it hits hair follicle, and that fires a nerve. And some of us scream and freak out, spider, or not, right? So we feel most of us feel with skin and hair really well. The next level of feel is muscle and fascia. We feel pressure on the muscle, or we contract the fascia and we feel force against something, like if you pull on a door that's stuck, you feel that with your muscle, right? You pull on it, it doesn't move. We created the force. The door didn't create the force, but we feel that pressure in muscle and fascia. And then usually we either think, oh, turn the doorknob, or we pull more, right? We increase the force. The level of feel this Ride from Within work is creating is in the bone and the marrow. And it's more like a hydraulic pressure. Now that might be weird, but I also have a mechanical background. It's pressure within the bone, and it's most people don't know it exists because they've never experienced it, so it does not exist. And so in our teaching, we when I say we increase our feel and our awareness, technically that's what we're starting to do, is feel pressure in the bone. And we want to move that because the techniques in the saddle, the actual physical techniques, involve rotating a bone, moving a bone with the least amount of muscle that redirects the force through it, like moving a hose that's carrying water through it. We redirect the hose, we aim the hose somewhere else, and the water goes onto the tomatoes instead of the zucchinis, right? But the hose doesn't go there. The nozzle of the hose doesn't water. It's the force flowing through the hose, which is water, that we redirect. So in our bones, when we learn to move differently, that's why it works, because it's redirecting that force through us. And that's the part that's been the most difficult to define, and therefore the most difficult to teach. It's why people will go a couple of years, and then I think they get frustrated. Because we haven't dropped their feel down, which is as much a mental process, right? We get to change how we use our brains. We get to drop into different brain waves, like delta and gamma waves. This more like meditation, but where you're wide awake in the meditation instead of that kind of meditation. So it's an active. My teacher in the very beginning, old Chinese guy, used to call it Tai Chi movement meditation. And what he meant was that you get this, I don't want to use the word trance, but you get this totally chilled out feeling, but you're absolutely aware, and therefore you're in control of every nuance in your body, right? Every little turn of the fingers, everything is just forefront in your mind, but it doesn't come from the thinking mind. It doesn't come from thinking of the next movement or reacting to what's, for in riding, reacting to the horse turning its head by tightening in your arm and your shoulder and your back and moving the rein. It comes from a response. So it's totally connected, first to yourself and then to the horse. And I believe this is, I'm sorry, I know I'm on a rant here. I truly know that this is where horses live. They do not live in their thinking mind, right? In that higher alpha, beta, theta brain waves, not in that conscious mind. They're in a much lower place. So in the big picture, we are learning with our beliefs and our movement of our body and therefore our response to meet horses where they live, as opposed to trying to figure them out and bring them into our world, right? Where we, I don't know, there's probably a better word. Horses need to fit to my life, you know. They need to fit into my barn or my field, or, you know, so often and I'm talking about the history of horses. They were used as a tool, right? For the cavalries, going back to warfare days, a tool. The horse in the field pulled a plow, it did a cart, and they were bred for that, and great. It was much. They had a job to do, and that's kind of, for me, I changed that belief. I'm like, what is this horse bringing to me personally? And usually it's stuff that I'm not maybe willing to look at, you know. And so there's a great healing side to it. But that's such a deeply personal thing that it's very hard to, you can just, like my teacher said, I can only create very fertile soil for you to grow what you want and grow how you want. She's not growing me. She's just creating. And what she meant is I can teach you how to move differently so your body's not wearing down. So you're conserving energy even through great movement. It's the least amount of energy necessary to move within these forces. So I can do what I want with it. Not dictating, I'm going to use this to do this. Or, you know, so in that sense.
That Cindy and I have started this channel is because, you know, we want to help people learn how to approach horses on their level from a riding standpoint, from a nutritional standpoint, from a housing standpoint, how to be them instead of making them be with us so much.
Exactly. And that's beautiful because that's what I'm trying to do in the saddle part. And that's where we so miss the mark, you know, only because we don't know different. Because there is, you know, there's been a shift of paradigm in how horses are kept. You know, like hopefully they're not kept in the stall. Box rest isn't the cure for everything. That they get to be amongst the herd, they get to move, they, you know, all these things. There's been a shift there. There's been a shift in how we maybe train horses, you know. Where the shift hasn't come in my mind is in my body, how I physically respond to a horse as opposed to physically react to the force that the horse has created. So I love that you guys have started this.
So what would you say
channel?
The biggest shift you have seen in horses when people ride in this new paradigm? What have you seen from them?
The first shift that I see when it's done correctly, and I don't mean to, you know, go right and wrong, but you can think you're doing it and not do it. So just when it actually happens, I see the hind end of the horse move completely. I say completely differently. The pivot points, every joint is used at one time instead of isolated movement. So I see the lower backs release and therefore the pivot point of movement in the hind end and changes from somewhere at the thoracic lumbar spine back to the sacral area. So I see a change there. I see them physically relax. I see their eyes soften. You know, all the classical, or not classical, but all the usual lick and chew, soften the eyes, the back comes up, their breath moves back, their diaphragm pushes back into their visceral gut and instead of staying up in their thoracic cavity. So these are all signs of relaxation, right? Again, efficient movement is not based on muscle tension necessarily. So I see that. I see horses. So I see horses approach a jump and their backs around and their heads come down before they leave the ground instead of their head and chest coming up. I see gaited horses who go around with their heads up. I mean, that's accepted in the discipline, and that's always to me a sign of a very held tight back. I see them come around, and I see the riders go, "Oh my God, what is?" Some of them don't like it because it's like, "Oh, I'll get bad. I won't get points at the show." But I see this overall relaxation that happens. I see horses that when the rider, because preceding the horse changing, the rider changes, right? It's not about training the horse differently. It's about training us. So I see and I get feedback from riders all over that their horses respond to them differently. They don't. So physical movement is one way, but also a willingness to kind of be there. Like they feel this connection, right? They feel this, and then from that we start to see, like my own wife has experienced it. Her horse fell asleep with her, right? She went out to get it in the field when she was in Scotland, and she couldn't find him because he was laying in a big patch of grass in the sunshine, sleeping. And so through this work, and she approached him and went, obviously doesn't want to come in and be ridden right now. So she laid down, I love it. She laid down with him and slept with him for 20 minutes. Then he got up first, and she got up and he walked to the gate, like, okay, now we can ride. So there's this other level of connection and I know that's not for everybody, because we get into our thinking mind and we have an agenda that's not to be with my horse. It might be on the outside, but I got to get to the barn. Oh, because my life outside the barn is so crazy. I get to the barn. Oh, just the smell of the horse. But then I have this agenda. I have to ride this horse and this horse and this horse, or just my horse. I got to do. And that's all our thinking mind. And that literally creates a separation, right? And we can think about the work of heart math, or just the brain waves, our brain waves way up in this high logical thinking mind that's a loop. We think about we feel something, then we think about what we felt, and we stay in this loop instead of being present and waiting to see what shows up. So that shift changes horses. And sometimes we like the change, and sometimes the horse has an opinion like, no, not today. Like if my wife had this agenda that I have to get this trot today, because the one I got yesterday, I've got to get it and get better at it. And the horse is sleeping and doesn't want to get up. Usually somebody would impose their agenda on the horse. So there's a different thing. And I think when we connect, especially physically, because we can have that connection emotionally, mentally, spiritually, if you will. But if the physical body hasn't changed, it's still the same old thing to the horse in the saddle. That's why I'm these last few years, I'm much more focused on what the rider needs to get it in their body, and so it's led me into a ton of research, and that research starts to point me in the direction of, horses live at this level, and we should meet them there, which means, we surrender a lot of things. which is, one of the old internal Chinese sayings about this martial art that this came from is yield and overcome. And that's what it means not to oppose force. It's another way of saying don't oppose force, yield to overcome. But in our culture, yielding is a loser's yield, right? That's like giving up. Quitters yield and give up. This is a completely different perspective of it, where I'm yielding, so I'm dropping my resistance, I'm dropping my guard, I'm opening up, I'm vulnerable to feel the horse, because we all know horses are, well, that's why we love horses, because they just show up open. And it's not till, it takes years to shut one down completely. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying is they're safe to open up too. So that yielding is so we can receive it. And then it's truly a different union. Sorry, another long answer to a short question.
So your Ride from Within program and method is really giving the rider the opportunity to learn to be more mindful and to be more in the present moment, and to not always be thinking about what you're doing, but being able to feel the connection between horse and rider, which deepens that partnership and ultimately gives that rider the opportunity to be able to achieve just about anything they want to achieve with their horse, but
yes,
with you, not the horse.
Yes. It's that idea of being present in the moment is, we can look at that applying to our mental state. Like, I'm just relaxed, I have no agenda. What comes, and it's all good, that kind of thing. And it also pertains to physical movement. The mind prepares for the next movement. We hear it in training all the time. Prepare for the transition. Prepare for the turn, regardless of the discipline. We get ready. But that's not this. This is, we move from moment to moment to moment with feel. So it's kind of hard to explain. But for me, because the speed at which the brain fires electrically certain synapses and stuff, I say a moment in that physical realm is 400ths of a second. It's like, so I get every 400ths of a second, we have an opportunity to respond, as opposed to 5 strides before the jump on getting ready. So it really defines it by exposing it. That's what I mean in the physical body, being present in the moment, so that I don't, because usually how I prepare is I tighten up. I hold my center more still. I get ready for a big jump. First I hold my breath, and then I hold my spine, and then I hold my hips. Okay, let's go. And the instant we do that, the horse holds its breath, its withers come up, its head gets set, it's, the hind end tightens up, and we go, oh, he's just needs more training to go over those jumps more relaxed. Right? That's one example. Or I come up to a place, and it's this simple too. I come up to a place in the arena where he's spooked. And now he always spooks. So I'm prepared, he's going to spook there. And, it's not too far a stretch of the imagination, is maybe the first time he spooked, it was, something that was valid. But the second time he spooked was the rider's anticipation and memory of the past, so not being present, and that unconscious tightening, like, whoa, I got to be ready just in case. And he's getting ready because you're getting ready. Like, ooh, what's there? So yes, being present, being mindful, being in the moment, just letting us become more like the horse. And you know, that's a challenge because it's not just about riding, it's about our whole lives. But you know, then we can say, well, my whole life is the same thing. It's the same in riding as I deal with people, as I deal with children, as I deal with, you know. So to me, it's quite beautiful. It's a beautiful way to live. And in the more practical sense, I'm going to ride better when I'm 60 than when I was 50, because this art of and these the physical changing how I respond to force and my physical body, which we don't do until we learn how to do it. When we do that, we get longevity. You know, I walk better. I don't trip as much. I have more energy than I used to have because I'm not burning so much up with these unconscious tensions in my body all the time. So again, it just adds to, you know, it's my teacher said, life is long, art is long, life is short. This is an art, you know. It's the art of knowing ourselves and using the art of using the human body differently. And it backs away from what the ego wants, you know, to just look good from the outside and be, you know, strong and fit and dressed right, and you know, all these things that are they're not unimportant, but they're secondary to riding from within, from moving from within. So yeah, it becomes
I think so many of us forget about why we got into this originally, and that was for the course. And we become so much goal oriented that we have a tendency to forget that, you know, that we originally got into it because we were obsessed with the animal and we loved the animal.
Yes.
Because of the way they make us feel.
Mm-hmm.
They have
exactly
to put us in the present moment. If we're not in the present moment, that's when they start mirroring back to us or acting up or challenging us. And it's their way of saying, hey, are you here with me or are you at the grocery store?
Right. And I always find it interesting to realize that it's not my case, but most of the riders and horse people that I know, they fell in love with horses before they knew about horses. You know, before at the barn, you were just mucking stalls and bringing water and hay to them, right? Or you didn't have this amazing connection in the saddle, that feeling, that connection, heartfelt connection preceded it. Mm-hmm. And we want to get back to that and know that it's just under the surface. But again, like you said, our agendas and what we want in our life covers that up, and we go, oh yeah, I love my horse. You know, with some scowl on your face as you're like, don't have enough time. I go, oh, okay, good. Let's remember that. So yeah, it gets back to that. And you know, in the bigger picture, you know, it challenges us to accept and love ourselves. Mm-hmm. You know, that's, you know, not often talked about because it's kind of, ooh, but horses bring to us that, you know, they mirror us too completely. You know, I can accept if my back's tight, or the horse's back is tight, but when he's a grumpy old curmudgeon someday, well, you know, I don't know about that, but you know what I mean. They have that ability to present us with what we need to let go of, what we need to surrender, the things about ourselves that no longer serve us. And we can take that right. We can take it right to the physical, using strength and leverage. to drive the hind end forward on any horse doesn't serve you very well when you're 65. Because when you do that, then you have to keep them off the floor. And, that means they're getting heavy in the hand and heavy on your back. And, so in that sense, it doesn't serve us anymore. Just like my belief system that horses are lazy. It's not mine, but, we have it. They're lazy. They don't like to move forward. That doesn't serve us very long when we go, oh my God, they're just doing what they do in nature. It's my agenda that wants them to move forward off my leg. Or, and so, yes, we get at every level, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, we have the opportunity to understand horses at a level that we go, oh, I can surrender this. I can surrender this. And it's more about the relationship, the heart relationship than the agenda of the business of horses or, this campaign with this horse. I've got to get a 79 this year to get my gold medal because, all those things that I believe we can have both.
Well, absolutely.
Right? When you have that heart, you can go, yeah, we're going to compete as long as the horse is enjoying it, whatever that means. As long as we don't compromise that connection with ourselves and therefore with the horse to get it. So
I really feel that the relationship between horse and rider is much like ballroom dancers. And can learn to practice together and flow and take each other's force, receive it and offer it back out again. You're going to practice rhythm and harmony and connection. And the minute that the person loses their focus or their feel or their agenda becomes more important than the actual partnership, that's when you start to lose it and you force it and it doesn't flow. So I often refer to that, your ballroom dancers. If you don't know the steps, how can you expect your horse to follow? And if you're trying to drag your horse around, you're not going to flow. He's going to resist. He's not going to it's not going to be harmonious.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good metaphor for it. And knowing that the horse is like always in that scenario, I think, okay, the horse is Baryshnikov, and I'm a beginner, and I never get, it's too often in that scenario, I'm Baryshnikov, and the horse needs to learn from me. But that's exactly it. It's this, you have to be open. I think that's the thing. Through this awareness of self, we start to become very open-minded, so that we remove judgment of why something happened in the moment. And when we do that, we can get into those deeper levels of feel, so that all of a sudden we go, oh, staying with that dancing scenario, this pirouette is always so difficult. And I think it's because my partner pulls me off balance right at the end, because they're too aggressive. And when I'm open and I don't believe that thought, right? I question that thought, or like I tell riders, don't believe what you think about what you're feeling. Quite often, it's not true, right? Don't believe what you think about what you're feeling. But in that dance thing, all of a sudden, I might realize, 3 steps before that pirouette, I tightened up with the thought of my partner being a little aggressive in that movement and pulling me off balance. And I tightened up, and that's why the pirouette doesn't work. But if I always think it's, so it is exactly that. It's being present, lowering our, removing our judgment as much as we can, which is scary, and again, and we get to face our fears. I think that's the biggest thing is, it gets down to it. I've been working a lot on how other disciplines, the words they use, and in describing these profound changes in a human being. And quite often we talk about we're either motivated and by fear or love. Fear or love, fear or love, fear or love. All our decisions, ultimately, if you talk about the spiritual side of it, fear or love, fear or love, and we want to come from that. In love, it's all good because it's all its own reward. And so I think that's another thing that they, horses, hopefully we with less judgment, they open our hearts, and that's reward in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And, regardless of whether I'm riding today or we're just hanging out in the field taking a nap, which sounds like an amazing thing to do with a horse to me.
I know for me that this style of riding, I wouldn't call it a style, or way of riding, has really changed for me. I was a really competitive dressage rider, and I still compete, but it has changed what my goal is and my focus is in my everyday life with my horse.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that other people can reach out to you and learn your ways and learn that way too, because it's
So James, if somebody was more interested in your work, what would be the best way for them to find you and connect with you? Of a book. Do I see that in the corner behind you?
Yeah, I have. They can get the book, Ride From Within by Trafalgar Square. They can go to, my website, ridefromwithin.com, and be patient because it's where I get to apply this work, love and patience, and it's under construction and it's very slow. It's still up, so they can get information there. They can email me which is probably the most direct, because I love that direct contact, at James at Ride From Within. Mm-hmm. If they have questions.
James at ridefromwithin.com.
Yes, James at ridefromwithin.com. There. They can call me on the telephone.
Wow.
There you go. 562-712-4749. Now, I say that because this is all part of my life, right? So I don't if somebody calls me I've never heard of, and they said, yeah, I saw this thing on YouTube, I wanted to ask you a question, I welcome that, right? Because it's just bring it in. So any way I can help, and that means being available.
Can you explain about your webinars too? I know you're offering those. I know some of my students.
Oh yeah, we've started. Not started. I do 2 or 3 times a year. I'll do a webinar, which is basically 2 or 2.5 hours of live, like this, live webinar, where I go through the basics. I go through the principles in great detail, the principles as they apply to physics, as they apply to neuroscience, as they apply to physiology, as they apply to everything. So it's an opportunity for me to teach the deeper levels and then give people chunks of practice, like go try this with your horse. So I do those a couple times a year. I have one coming up in April. And so to get information about those, you could go to the website and sign up for the newsletter, or you can email me and say, I want to be on the newsletter, and you get that. So I'm doing these webinars. I'm also doing like, it's the predecessor to an online course, but it's video lessons where I'll give you these things to do. You videotape it, send it to me, I review it, then we review it live together, and I give you the fixes, and then you go try to apply the fixes. You videotape that and come back. I like that not many people do it, because I think that in the past the video has been a challenge.
Mhm.
You know, like the technology of video, like, yeah, I can get it on my camera, but I upload it and it's wrong format, and I go, oh, you know, I get sidetracked. So, but with technology getting so much easier, like I have a new phone, I can take a slow motion video, push a button, and it's uploaded to Facebook, YouTube, everywhere. It all does it. So that's another way. Clinics, I'm still, you know, I'm doing more and more clinics around the world. Every once or twice a year, I'll do 5 to 7 day kind of retreat style clinic where we come in, and it's, you know, it's it's intense, meaning it's intense. There's a lot of information, and we need time. That's why it's a longer format, so we can, hopefully what happens in the retreats is we get out of our life, our busy life, got 10 horses to feed and 4 clients to see, you know, we can kind of, although some people would rather just go to Hawaii, maybe I'm one of them, and sit on a lounge chair drinking Mai Tais and watch the sun come up and rise, you know, come up and set every day. But it's that kind of thing where we get out of the things that pull us away from ourselves, our true selves. So there's some retreats. There's just a ton of stuff that we're doing now.
Do you bring your horse to your retreats?
Yes, but no buts. Yes, you and your horse. Although if you're coming from Europe, or if I'm doing one in Australia, you bring yourself, and you'll find an amazing partner, 4-legged partner there. We always seem to, well, and this is what people tell me, that was the perfect horse, because I didn't have issues with that horse that I have with my horse. And I'm like, oh, okay, good. Remember that. You have issues, really? You know, so it's just, you know, at some point I'll have a place where people just come to me. You know, I don't go anywhere. Everybody comes to me. But, you know, that's not today. But
Right.
But that's what we want, because it's life. We want to be, you know,
Have your
just want to. Yes, yeah. So
Well-
that's how, you know, James at Ride From Within is a great way to get a hold of me, or, you know, visit the website. It's being, you know, it's being remodeled, and that's ridefromwithin.com, or call you guys and you can get a hold of me.
That's
Yeah.
It's true.
Thank you so much, James. This was wonderful to learn. Every time I'm in your presence, I learn more. It expands my thoughts and my
Inspires us.
understanding. Yeah.
Inspires us to
Thank you.
horses.
It's a pleasure to play that part, and you guys do the same for me. You know, students do the same for me, especially, you know, the ones that I have relationships with. You know, long term, we've ridden together. We've watched, you know, all of us grow. You know, I'm growing just like you guys are, and so you guys inspire me. And I'll not that I'll leave you with this, but the Dalai Lama, I heard him speak. I heard a tape of him speak, and he was talking about teachers and students, and he said a teacher's commitment to a student should be lifelong from the first moment, from the first day, but that should never be expected in return from a student. like the teacher's commitment to the student is wide open and complete, but that shouldn't be what the students demanded of. Like, no, you have to stay with me, and you have to, pay me this much for this thing. And that's why when I remember that and live that and know that, I go, oh, every time you guys come into my life, it enriches my life. It never takes anything away. It only adds to. And I think that's the big picture of this kind of work is we get to a place in ourselves where nobody can take anything away from my life. They can only add to it if I choose. Wow, what a great way to live.
I think that's a beautiful way to close this interview is on that thought, is that nobody can take anything away from us. They can only enrich our lives. And
Yes.
the horses,
Sure
that
do
is the truth about the
Yes, isn't it so true for horses?
Yes.
Awesome.
And I would love to see more of us evolve into the new paradigm of having that philosophy towards our horses. Is we don't take anything away from them. We only give.
Yes, just add to. Yeah, it's a beautiful way to move forward.
Thank you so much, James. It was really a pleasure spending this time with you, and we look forward to seeing you, I believe, in May.
Yep. Thank you, James.
You're welcome. I'm very much looking forward to May, and maybe I'll get to drop by as I drive through. We'll see a little earlier in the year, but thank you so much for the opportunity to share this and deepen our relationship and help others. Yeah.
Thank you for what you do for the horses and the humans.
Thank you. Thank you very much.